I'm Ethan, I'm 32 years old, and up until about 6 months ago I thought I was living the kind of life people envy. I'd worked my way up from absolutely nothing. No silver spoon, no trust fund, just me, a beat-up truck, and a willingness to do whatever it took to not end up like my old man who spent more time in jail than he did at home. I started my home renovation business when I was 23, pulling in small jobs, painting walls, fixing drywall, doing yard work, anything. 10 years later I was running a company with a team of 25 guys, high-end clients, and projects that would make the front page of real estate magazines. I wasn't rich, not really, but I was very comfortable. I could finally say I had made it. And through it all, the one constant I had was Lisa, my wife, the love of my life. She's 30, an elementary school teacher with the warmest laugh and the kind of smile that just knocks the air out of your lungs. We met when I was 25 and she was 23. She came into the hardware store I used to get supplies from, asking about paint samples for her classroom. She looked like sunshine in a hoodie, holding a coffee cup bigger than her face, and she asked me if I knew the difference between eggshell and satin finish. I told her I'd paint her whole classroom just to prove it. She laughed, I blushed like an idiot, and the rest is history. We got married 3 years later. A small wedding, nothing fancy, just close family and friends in her aunt's backyard. She cried when we danced to "Can't Help Falling in Love," and whispered in my ear that she knew we were forever. And I believed her. God, I believed every word. We had the kind of marriage that people pointed at and said, "That's goals." No yelling, no drama. We cooked dinner together, binge-watched true crime shows on weekends, made breakfast in bed on Sundays. When I got my first big contract and bought us a fixer-upper farmhouse just outside of town, she said it felt like living in a movie. We spent months renovating it together. She picked the paint colors, I did the crown molding, she planted roses along the front porch, I built her a swing to read on. Every night she would fall asleep with her head on my chest and mumble, "We're so lucky, aren't we?" I always answered, "Luck had nothing to do with it. We built this." And I meant it. I truly thought we were unbreakable. But I guess no one ever sees the cracks until the whole thing comes crashing down. It started with something so small it barely registered. One night, around 11, Lisa's iPad buzzed while she was in the shower. I was half asleep on the couch, and I glanced over. The message said, "You looked so damn good today. Wish I could have kissed you goodbye." There was a red heart emoji at the end. My chest went tight. At first, I thought maybe it was a joke. Maybe a student's parent being weird or someone texting the wrong number. I picked it up, entered her passcode without thinking. We never kept secrets like that, and saw the message came from someone named J. Just the letter. That didn't help. I clicked on the chat, but it was locked with a separate password. I stared at it, feeling like the floor was tilting underneath me. Lisa came out of the bathroom right then, towel around her hair, humming some Taylor Swift song. I didn't say anything. I put the iPad down, acted like I hadn't seen a thing. I don't know why. Maybe because a part of me didn't want to believe what I saw. Maybe because everything we had built, the house, the life, the memories, it all felt too precious to shatter over a maybe. The next day, I couldn't focus. I kept replaying the message in my head. Who the hell was Jay? Why was Lisa getting locked messages from some guy talking about kissing her? That night, I tried to bring it up gently. I said something like, "Hey, babe, who's Jay? I saw a message pop up on your iPad last night." She looked confused for a split second, then laughed and said, "Oh, that's Jamie. One of the moms from my class. She's super flirty, but harmless. Total girl crush vibes." I nodded, but something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was like a sixth sense, this dull throb in my gut telling me she was lying. And the thing about me? I've learned to trust my gut. You don't survive in business, especially in construction, without knowing when someone's full of it. So I waited. I didn't accuse her. I didn't snoop. I just watched. Little things started standing out. Lisa used to leave her phone anywhere, kitchen counter, nightstand, sometimes even in my truck. But suddenly, it was always in her pocket or flipped screen down. She'd get messages late at night, glance at them quickly, then put her phone away. She started going for walks in the evening, something she never did before. When I asked to join, she'd say, "I just need alone time, babe. Work's been stressful." She didn't know I was watching from the upstairs window when she'd pace the edge of our yard on the phone, talking quietly, smiling. Not the kind of smile you give your mom or your best friend. The kind of smile that makes your voice drop and your eyes sparkle. The kind of smile I hadn't seen her give me in months. One night she left her purse on the dining room table when she went out for one of her walks. I stared at it for a long time. I swear I sat there for 15 minutes debating with myself. Then I opened it. Tucked behind her wallet was a second phone. A cheap burner Android. No case, no lock. I held it like it was radioactive. My hands were actually shaking as I turned it on. The home screen was plain black, no background image, no apps, just a few icons. And the messages. My name wasn't in there, not once, but his was. John. Every thread between them was like a punch to the gut. Thinking about last weekend, your hands on my hips. You wore that red shirt just to torture me, didn't you? He has no clue. I feel bad sometimes, but not bad enough to stop. I scrolled and scrolled, heart in my throat, until I found the oldest messages. Almost 13 months ago. A full year. A year of lies. A year of her kissing me goodnight, telling me she loved me, while texting another man that she missed his touch. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to scream. But instead I set it back exactly where I found it. I sat there in the dark until she came home, her cheeks flushed from the cold night air. She kissed my forehead and said, "Did you eat dinner?" I nodded, lied through my teeth. "Yeah, just leftovers." She smiled, walked past me, and started talking about some student in her class who made a volcano that exploded in the hallway. I watched her laugh like nothing had changed, like she wasn't shattering the life we built with every breath. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do. I couldn't confront her without showing I went through her stuff. But I couldn't live like this either. I needed proof. I needed the truth, not the version she'd spin. So I came up with a plan. I took a week off work without telling her and spent it turning our home into a quiet surveillance zone. I installed small voice recorders in the kitchen, the bedroom, the living room. Hidden cameras too, all discreet, tucked into bookshelf corners or decorative lamps. I even bugged the backyard porch where she liked to take calls. Every night I downloaded the audio, every morning I reviewed the footage. And what I learned made everything worse. Because it wasn't just physical. It wasn't just about sex. It was emotional. Deep. She told him things she hadn't told me in years. She said he got her, said he made her feel young again. She called him her real home. She said she was trapped in a marriage she didn't have the guts to leave. And the worst part? She said she didn't think I was a bad guy. Just boring. Predictable. Like a warm blanket she didn't want to hurt. She said that out loud. He's a warm blanket. Safe, but not exciting. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, listening to the woman I built a life with reduce me to a security system she didn't have the heart to unplug. And all I could think was, what else don't I know? The first thing I did the next morning was call a guy the first used once for a client's divorce case. He specialized in private investigation work, real low profile, not the trench coat and camera type, more like the kind who could find out what brand of gum someone chewed in 8th grade if you gave him a name. I told him I needed everything he could get on someone named John. All I had was a first name and Lisa's phone records, which I had accessed through our shared mobile account. I didn't even need to explain why. He took the job, no questions asked, just said, "Give me 3 days and I'll know his shoe size." 3 days turned into 2. The guy was good, scary good. John turned out to be Jonathan Reed, 26 years old, worked at a local gym called Iron Haven, about 15 minutes from our house. Personal trainer, 6'1", tatted up arms full of motivational quotes and lions and Roman numerals and whatever else guys like that think makes them deep. He had no criminal record, lived in a 1-bedroom apartment that looked like it came straight out of a workout influencer's Instagram feed. And here's the kicker. He thought Lisa was divorced. She told him we'd separated 2 years ago and that I was some controlling, emotionally distant husband who couldn't let go. The guy had no idea he was the other man. I don't know if that made me feel better or worse, but I did know one thing. Lisa was playing both of us. I asked the investigator if there was any financial overlap. He looked into our accounts, and that's when I really lost it. Lisa had been sending money to John. Small amounts at first. A couple hundred here and there through Venmo and Zelle, sometimes marked as lunch or groceries. Then bigger payments. $1,500 one time for tuition, which made no sense. He wasn't in school. $2,000 for lease deposit. When I traced it back, I found out she helped him get into a nicer apartment in the same complex, with our money. Money I had worked for. Money she never even asked me about. When I confronted our financials deeper, I found a shared credit card we barely used, racked up with charges I never made. Nike, Adidas, Lululemon, gym gear, male grooming kits, massage appointments. None of it was for me. She had maxed it out supporting this guy who probably thought he was dating a middle school art teacher with a wealthy ex-husband. Meanwhile, I was working 10-hour days, coming home to microwave leftovers and a wife who told me she was too tired to cuddle. I still hadn't confronted her. I wanted to do it right. I wanted her to sit there and look me in the eyes while the whole truth spilled out of her mouth. I didn't want to corner her in anger. I wanted her to run out of places to hide. So I made my plan. I told her I had a client meeting in another city and I'd be gone 2 days. I kissed her goodbye that morning, pretending not to notice the overnight bag she tried to sneak into the trunk of her car. I waited until she drove off, then pulled back into the driveway 5 minutes later. I parked a few streets over, walked back through the woods behind our house, and slipped inside through the back door. I sat in the attic above the guest room where one of my audio recorders was hidden, and I waited. 2 hours later, Lisa came back. She didn't even hesitate. She brought John inside like it was nothing. They laughed in the hallway. He complimented the new throw pillows she had picked out. He said the house felt cozy. She told him she wanted him to feel like it was his home too. I had to clamp my hand over my mouth when she said that. My home. My dream. My work. His home. They made out in the kitchen against the same counter where we baked Christmas cookies last year, then went upstairs, to our bedroom. Not the guest room. Not a hotel. Our bed. I didn't record that part. I couldn't. I sat in the attic, staring at the insulation, praying for the ceiling to collapse just so I wouldn't have to hear her fake those moans for him the way she used to for me. The next morning, I waited until he left, kissed her on the cheek, called her, baby, and said he'd be back after work. I waited another hour, packed a bag, and left again, for real this time. I drove to a motel not far from the city and spent the next 2 days gathering everything I needed. I took photos of the burner phone, all the texts, all the wire transfers. I had the voice recordings, the footage from the hidden cams. I compiled everything into a folder on a thumb drive I labeled, just in case, and I backed it up twice. Once on my personal drive and once with my lawyer. I wasn't just going to divorce her, I was going to make sure I walked away clean. No alimony, no house split, no argument. I'd given her my love, my loyalty, my money, my life. And now, I was going to give her what she gave me, the truth. I called John. I waited until I was calm, rehearsed it like a script, and dialed the number. He picked up sounding surprised. Hey, Lisa, what's up? I said, this isn't Lisa, and you're going to want to sit down. I told him everything. I didn't yell. I didn't insult him. I just told him the truth. That Lisa was married. That I was her husband. And that she'd been lying to both of us. He didn't believe me at first. Then I emailed him screenshots, photos, messages, receipts. At first, he was angry, defensive. But by the time we hung up, he sounded broken, like he had just realized the floor under him wasn't real. He thanked me for telling him and said he needed to figure some things out. I told him he might want to start by figuring out where Lisa kept her second phone, and whether he was the only one she was texting. I didn't know if that was true, but it felt good to say it. 2 days later, I came home. Lisa greeted me with a hug, acted like nothing had changed, cooked dinner, wore my favorite sweater. I pretended too, because tomorrow, everything would be different. I'd made a dinner reservation for Saturday night at a nice restaurant, the same one where Lisa and I celebrated our 4th anniversary. I also made a reservation for John, under his name. I told him I needed one last favor, to meet me there and play along, just for an hour. He agreed, not for me, for himself. He wanted closure. I told Lisa it would be a surprise. She wore a red dress, the same one I'd seen in the pictures she sent John. She twirled in front of the mirror, asked if she looked good. I told her she looked incredible. I even meant it. For a second, she was beautiful. Just not mine anymore. We got to the restaurant and I had them bring John to our table 5 minutes after we were seated. When she saw him, she froze like a deer in headlights. He sat down across from us, folded his hands, and said quietly, I think it's time we talked. She tried to laugh it off, made some joke like, what is this, a bad rom-com intervention? But when I pulled out the folder with all the evidence, her face dropped. I laid it on the table and said, Lisa, meet the truth. The rest of the night is a blur, but I'll never forget the way she looked at me. Not with guilt, not with regret, but with panic. Like a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. Not because she felt bad, but because she finally had to face the consequences. She cried. She begged. She said it was complicated. She said she loved me, but she loved him too. She said she just wanted to feel something again. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. I just listened. And when she was done, I said, we're done. The check came, and I paid it. Because of course I did. She never once reached for her wallet, even then. I drove her home in silence, dropped her off at the curb. She tried to touch my arm. I pulled away. I told her I'd send the divorce papers Monday, and that she could keep the house, because I didn't want it anymore. What I didn't tell her was that I had already bought a penthouse apartment in the city under a shell company she didn't even know existed. It had a view of the skyline and a silence I hadn't felt in years. She could have the farmhouse, the porch swing, the roses, everything she built her lies into. I didn't want any of it, not anymore. What I wanted was peace, and I was finally on my way to it. I didn't hear from Lisa for almost a week after the dinner. Not a single text, not a phone call, nothing. Part of me thought maybe that was it. Maybe she was going to just disappear and let the divorce roll through quietly. But of course, that would have been too easy. On the 7th day, just as I was starting to settle into the silence of the new apartment, she showed up at my office. Hair curled, face done up like she was trying to impress someone. She stood at the front desk holding a box of my old things from the house. Books, hoodies, a watch I hadn't worn in years. When my assistant buzzed me and said, "Your wife is here," I almost said, "Tell her I'm dead." But I sighed and told her to send her in. Lisa walked in like nothing had happened, smiled softly, said she just wanted to bring me some stuff and maybe talk. She sat across from me, and I waited, arms crossed, silent. She said she was sorry. Again. But this time it sounded more rehearsed than real. She said she was confused. She missed me. She had made a mistake. She didn't want a divorce. I told her she should have thought of that before she invited another man into our bed. She started crying. Big, wet, theatrical tears that used to make me melt. But now all I saw was someone trying to save herself from the fire she started. I asked her why. I wanted to know what I had done, where I had failed. And she looked at me and said, "You didn't fail. I don't know. I didn't think you'd ever leave." Those words hit harder than anything else she'd done. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. She never thought I'd leave. She thought I was safe. Too loyal. Too predictable. She had built her betrayal on the assumption that I would never have the guts to walk away. And that made everything clear. I wasn't just hurt. I was underestimated. I told her the papers were coming Monday. No discussion. No second chance. No room for negotiation. She left without another word. But 2 days later, I got a call from John. It was early morning. I was making coffee. His name popped up on my phone like a ghost. I answered, confused, and his voice was sharp, angry. He asked if I had talked to Lisa lately. I said no. He told me she had shown up at his apartment the night before, sobbing, saying she was pregnant. I sat down on the edge of the couch, trying to process what I was hearing. Pregnant. She told him it was his. Said she was sure. But he didn't believe her. Said the timeline didn't add up. Said she'd been weird about dates, vague about when they last slept together, and now she was acting like the baby was his lifeline. I didn't know what to say. I asked if he was going to stay with her. He laughed like he was choking on it. Said she was delusional if she thought a baby would fix any of this. I hung up, hands shaking, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to deny it, say it couldn't be true, she wouldn't do that, not her. But another part of me remembered the look on her face at dinner when she realized her secrets were out. The desperation in her voice when she begged me to forgive her. Lisa was capable of anything if it meant keeping control. I called my lawyer, told him we might have a complication, asked him to add a clause in the divorce about paternity testing if she tried to claim child support. He said he'd handle it. 2 weeks passed with no word from Lisa, until a thick envelope arrived at my office. Inside was a letter from her attorney and a handwritten note from Lisa herself. It said she was pregnant, 12 weeks, and that she hoped we could be civil for the child's sake. She said she wanted me to be involved. Said she didn't want our child growing up without a father. I stared at the note for a long time, trying to feel something. Joy, panic, anything. But I just felt numb. I called my lawyer again, set up a private paternity test and sent a response letter requesting one immediately. She refused at first, said I should trust her, said the timing made it obvious. I told her trust died the day she let another man call her baby. Eventually, she relented. We scheduled the test for a Friday morning at a clinic downtown. She showed up alone, visibly pregnant now, wearing a flowing dress like she was trying to look like the picture of innocence. We didn't speak, not even in the waiting room. The nurse called us in separately, did the test, and told us results would come in a few days. I went back to work, tried to stay busy, but every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, wondering if it was the call. When it finally came, 3 days later, I was alone in the apartment eating takeout on the couch. The nurse told me the results were in and that I was, in fact, the biological father. I didn't speak for a moment. I just stared at the floor, breathing slowly, letting the weight of it settle into my chest. I was going to be a father, with a woman I no longer loved, no longer trusted, a woman who had betrayed me in ways I still hadn't fully processed. I thought I'd feel angry, or trapped, but instead, I felt clear, focused. This child wasn't a punishment, it was a responsibility, and I would rise to it, no matter what. The next day, I filed for full custody preemptively. My lawyer said it was aggressive, but not impossible, given her history of infidelity, financial deception, and emotional instability. We built a case, gathered every document, every transfer, every recording. I didn't want revenge, I just wanted control. I wanted to raise my child in peace. without the chaos that Lisa carried like a shadow. When she found out I was filing for custody, she exploded, called me screaming, accused me of trying to steal her baby, said I was punishing her for a mistake. I told her no. I was protecting my child from growing up in a lie. She hung up on me, but her lawyer called back a week later, asking to negotiate terms. She didn't want court, didn't want the recordings public, didn't want her double life aired out in front of a judge. We reached an agreement: joint legal custody, primary physical custody to me, visitation to her. I offered her part of the house back if she wanted to move into the guest unit, but she declined, said it would be too painful. I didn't press. I was already remodeling it into a nursery. I painted the walls a soft green, bought a rocking chair, built a crib with my own hands, just like I used to when I believed in things. When the baby was born, a boy, I was there in the room. She named him Caleb. I held him in my arms and felt something crack open inside me, something warm and terrifying and real. And in that moment, I knew everything that happened before didn't matter, because this child was mine, and I would give him the one thing I never had: stability, safety, honesty, love, the kind that doesn't come with conditions or secrets. Just me, him, and a future I'd build from scratch. Again, the first year with Caleb was the hardest and the most meaningful time of my life. I'd always thought of myself as a capable man, someone who could handle pressure, led a team, meet deadlines, fix things with my hands, and solve problems with my head. But nothing prepared me for fatherhood, for the way a newborn can destroy your schedule, your sleep, and your sanity, and somehow still make you smile when your whole body feels like it's falling apart. I was alone in it, and that was by choice. Lisa visited once a week for 4 hours. Sometimes she was on time. Sometimes she canceled last minute. Sometimes she cried when she held him. Other times she barely made eye contact with me. I didn't push her either way. I had stopped trying to figure out which version of her would show up. I just focused on Caleb. I hired a nanny during work hours, a retired pediatric nurse named Maggie, who treated Caleb like her own grandson. She was soft-voiced but sharp as a tack, the kind of woman who could rock a baby to sleep with one hand while writing out feeding logs in neat cursive with the other. She kept things steady while I learned to balance diapers and contracts. I stopped going out, stopped dating, stopped taking calls that didn't matter. I wasn't bitter. I was rebuilding. In silence and with purpose. People talk about healing like it's this passive thing, like time just patches you up while you sit still. But that's not true. Healing is loud sometimes, and lonely, and ugly. It comes in the form of midnight feedings and tiny hands wrapping around your finger, and long walks with a stroller just to clear your head. The hardest part wasn't losing Lisa. It was realizing how much of myself I had poured into someone who saw me as a backup plan. I had made her the center of my world, and all she ever saw me as was a safe place to land when her other choices didn't work out. But Caleb wasn't like that. He didn't lie, didn't manipulate. He cried when he needed something and smiled when I got it right. He was honest in a way adults forget how to be. And I started to find pieces of myself again in that simplicity. In those quiet moments with him falling asleep on my chest or laughing at the sound of my stupid impressions. 6 months after his birth, Lisa texted me asking if we could talk. She said it was important. I met her at a coffee shop near her place, sat across from her while she stirred a cup she never drank from. She told me she was seeing a therapist, that she had started looking at her past, that she realized how badly she'd hurt me, and how lost she had been. I didn't say much. I let her talk. She said she wanted to be a bigger part of Caleb's life, that she was ready to step up. I told her actions mattered more than words. She nodded and said she understood. For the next few weeks, she showed up on time, brought diapers, read to him, sang to him, stayed longer than she was scheduled for. I let her, because it wasn't about punishing her anymore. It was about Caleb. And if she was going to be present, if she was truly going to try, I wasn't going to stand in the way of that. But then, 2 months later, she missed a visit. Then another. Then another. This time, no explanations, no apologies, just radio silence. Maggie asked me one morning if I wanted her to stop prepping the spare bottle. I said yes. We never talked about it again. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail from Lisa's lawyer. She was moving to another state, said she'd be back in a few months and would file for formal changes to custody after she was settled. I didn't fight it. I didn't even flinch. I just looked at Caleb in his high chair, smeared in applesauce and laughing at the dog, and knew we'd be okay. Months passed. Then a year. Then 2. Lisa became a name on a birth certificate and a handful of birthday cards that arrived late with no return address. I kept them in a drawer, not for me, for him. Because one day, he might want to know where she was when he was learning to walk, when he was saying his first words, when he fell off his bike and scraped his knee and needed someone to hold him. And when he asks, I won't lie. I'll tell him the truth. That she loved him, probably in her own way. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes people don't know how to show up. And the world keeps turning anyway. And so do we. 3 months ago, Caleb turned 4. We had a small party at the apartment. Just close friends and a few kids from his preschool. Maggie was there, of course. She brought a handmade quilt with his name stitched into it. The cake was dinosaur themed because Caleb's currently obsessed with T-Rexes. And after everyone left and the sun went down, I sat alone on the balcony, overlooking the skyline with a whiskey in hand. I thought about how far we'd come, how I had built a life from the ruins of what Lisa left behind. A quiet, peaceful, clean life. But then the phone rang. It was Lisa. I hadn't heard her voice in over a year, and I almost let it go to voicemail. But curiosity won. I answered, and she sounded different. Not just older, but worn down. Tired in a way I recognized. She asked if I had a minute and said she needed to tell me something. I listened in silence while she told me she had been diagnosed with stage 2 cervical cancer. That the doctors caught it early, but treatment had already begun. She said she wasn't calling for sympathy, just clarity. She wanted to be honest, finally. She said that when she left town, it wasn't just to start over. It was to escape the guilt, the shame, the crushing weight of everything she'd broken. She said she had met someone who knew about her past and accepted her anyway. But they'd split up after her diagnosis. She was alone now, and scared. Then she asked me if I could bring Caleb to see her. Just once. Not for her, she said, but for him. So he could know his mother before it was too late. I told her I'd think about it. She said she understood. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling thinking about all the ways she'd hurt me. All the trust she had shattered. All the years she had missed. But I also thought about Caleb. About what I'd want if I were him. I didn't know Lisa anything. But Caleb might. A week later, I drove him 4 hours to a hospice center just outside the city where she was being treated. He didn't know who she was. I hadn't told him much. Just that we were going to meet someone special. When she saw him, she cried in a way I don't think I've ever seen from her before. It wasn't performative. It wasn't guilt. It was grief. Real and raw. She hugged him. Told him he was beautiful. Told him she was sorry. He didn't understand. He smiled politely and asked her if she had dinosaurs. She laughed through her tears and gave him a toy T-Rex she had bought from the gift shop. We stayed for half an hour. Then I said it was time to go. As we were leaving, she reached for my arm. Her hand was trembling. She said, "Thank you for giving him the life I never could. For being everything I wasn't." I didn't say anything. Just nodded. And walked away. On the drive home, Caleb fell asleep in the backseat, holding the dinosaur. I looked at him through the mirror and felt something shift. Not closure. Not forgiveness. Just peace. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Lisa. A short note. No apologies. No justifications. Just a line that read, "I hope you tell him I tried." She died 4 days after that. I didn't go to the funeral. There wasn't one. No family came. No friends. Just a nurse and a priest. I spread her ashes myself on a hill behind the old farmhouse she once said felt like a movie. Caleb never asked about her again. Maybe one day he will. Maybe he won't. But when that day comes, I'll sit him down. I'll tell him the truth. The whole messy, complicated, broken truth. And then I'll tell him how much he was loved. By me. Always by me. Because in the end, that's what matters. Not the pain. Not the betrayal. Not the story that fell apart. But the one we built in its place.